Hi folks, Shiva here with Will to Live, here to help you help your loved ones and yourself. So today I wanted to talk about a little bit of a lesson that I gave a few weeks ago. One of the things as a teacher is you kind of notice when your students are paying extra close attention to things. And so I was teaching a lesson in my family course, and during that lesson I noticed that some of the students were pulling out their phones and taking a few pictures of the slides. That doesn't happen very often. But that showed me that, you know what, this stuff is really relevant and this is really important, particularly to my students in that scenario. But I think it's really important for anybody, because what I want to talk about today is relationships, and it's not necessarily just intimate romantic relationships. It's family, it's friendship. And so this is really key to mental health, wellness, feeling satisfied in life. So today I just want to highlight a few key points about relationships and how we can work on a term that it's in my textbook, but we talk about relational maintenance. And so relational maintenance is this idea that when you're in a relationship, it takes work, it takes effort. And so there's got to be things that happen in the relationship that will ensure that we have longevity, right? You want your relationships to last. And the best marriages, the best, families that survive, they show that there's a lot of relational maintenance work that's happening behind the scenes and on the stage too. So let's talk about a few of those strategies that people utilize. The first is something that we call positivity. It's pretty much that, right? You want to be positive in your relationships. You ever think about how you have people that kind of just drain you? You're around them, they're very negative about everything, everything's bad, and they're not really exuding a lot of positivity. That's a hard relationship to carry on, because you take on a lot of their vibe. And so relational maintenance requires that, yes, you want to be real, you want to share your fears, you want to share your anxieties, but you also want to share positivity. So what are you bringing to the relationship, or what are you contributing to the family in terms of, how positive can you be? Are you able to look on the bright side? Can you bring some of those more positive emotions? Then we have openness. How open are you to talk about things? Oftentimes, as a teacher, you can feel like, hey, I've got to keep my distance, I got to be a professional. But the literature says you have to be a real person if you want your students to feel comfortable in your class. So how do you show up in that way? If they feel like they know you and they feel close to you, they'll actually learn better. And this is the same with families, right? If we want to help each other, if we want to challenge each other, even in relationships and friendships, how open are we being with this other person or other members in our family? Then we also have assurances. This is basically our different love languages. How are we showing up? How are we showing affection in our friendships, in our relationships? Are we letting people know how much we appreciate them and love them? And if you have heard about the 5 love languages, I'll just do a quick one. There's acts of service. How do you serve each other? There's gifts. It doesn't have to be expensive. You pick a flower, or you take a picture that you think that person would really enjoy and appreciate. There's physical affection. A lot of people really enjoy a high five, or a hug, or just sitting really close to you. What are those little tokens of physical affection you give? For other people, it's words of affirmation. Sending that text in the middle of the day that says, hey, just thinking about you, I love you. Or putting a little post-it in your kid's lunchbox just to say, I love you, I think you're fabulous. And then the last one is, let me think, acts of service, physical affection, words of affirmation. Help me out here, people. You know them. Receiving gifts, as I've mentioned, and also quality time. How much time are you spending in the presence of other members in a way that feels meaningful to not just the giver, but also the receiver? And so there's a lot of these assurances we can give each other in our families, in our friendships, that hey, I care, I'm here, and so on. And talking about that quality time, there's also the importance of joint activities. What are you doing together? I once heard somebody say, in a story, that a kid was sharing, I know my dad really loves me, but I'm not so sure he likes me. And that's always stuck with me, right? So in relationships and friendships, how do you show the people that you care about that, hey, I enjoy you, I want to hang out with you, I want to know what you think, and making intentional time to do that. And then we also have the sharing of tasks, which is a little bit related to that acts of service, right? You often hear people talk about, I do everything around the house. In fact, I remember seeing a video about a woman who was in a relationship, and she was keeping tally of all the things she did and all the things her husband didn't do. And that I want to highlight as something that's really unhealthy in a relationship, especially when you post it. Keeping tally of, hey, this is unfair. Now, it's really important to talk about those things, but it's going to lead down a difficult path if you start to keep tally and you hold resentment about it. So communication is key. And so on that point, in relationships, you want to be able to share tasks, right? And feel that you are partners with each other in terms of an intimate relationship. And also in a family, it's really important that people feel like they're a contributing member of that family. How do you provide those opportunities for each other, and how do you encourage each other in that way, rather than being miserable and resenting each other for uneven task sharing? Then there's also social networks. I've often heard of people saying, I just want to find my perfect soulmate, the person who completes me. And the intention and the longingness is very valid. What I do want to say for this point is that, we're so bent on this person being that perfect partner that we often forget they can't fill every need of ours. And so it's really important, and that's a very unfair expectation to place on a partner when we're talking about intimate relationships. And so it's really important to be able to have social networks, to be able to have friends and family that you've integrated into your life, so that your significant other is not expected to fill all these different needs that you have. Also, on the note of trying to find that perfect person, it's also important to work on being that perfect partner, right? Sometimes we're so focused on, I just am on the search for that perfect companion, rather than thinking, how can I be that perfect companion so that these qualities, do attract the right person and the right fit for me. And so if we can reframe that, it could be really powerful for our own journeys. And then you also want to talk about how there are barriers, or what real intimacy looks like. So when you have families, when you have friendships, when you have those special relationships in your life, what does that look like in terms of how it plays out? So one of the really important factors of this is confirmation, which is the idea that you are always confirming this as the other person's presence in your life. So, wanting to know their thoughts. And it's not just about the deep nitty gritty stuff. It's like, hey, I heard this on the news. What do you think about that? You're confirming that they have value in your life. Their presence matters to you. Their opinions matter to you. And you respond and you listen. And you're accepting of what they bring to the table. There's also the importance of self-disclosure. So I'm not here to say you gotta share your deepest secrets. Like, I'm not in your relationship, so that's your call to make. But what we do know is that healthy relationships have a good amount of self-disclosure in them. I know that for parents, it can be really difficult to share things that they think will portray them as weak or flawed to their children. And yet children sometimes need that, right? They need to be able to see, hey, my parents messed up, so if I mess up, it's going to be okay because my parent is, amazing. And my parent, I remember as a teenager asking my parents specific questions about, what it was like for your teenage years. Did you go through what I went through? And there was a certain amount of wanting to distance me from that information. And of course, I'm not judging them. We all do the best we can with the tools we have at all points in our life. But I remember really wanting to know, that you messed up too, or you had these difficult situations too. So I wouldn't downplay the power of self-disclosure in friendships, in relationships, in intimate relationships. It's really showcasing your inner world to somebody else. And when you're able to do that, that can really contribute to that relationship and help bond you. So you be the judge of what you want to share, but keep in mind that that self-disclosure piece, that sharing of your inner world to somebody else is powerful. And being able to listen and accept and validate somebody else's inner world is really powerful as well. Then we also have communication. Now, communication is absolutely key. And sometimes it's hard to express what's going on for you inside, right? You want to share something, but you don't know how to share it and how they'll respond. And even in those situations, it's okay to say to your, if it's your significant other or your friendship or a family member, hey, I'm going through this dilemma in my heart and my head, and these are all my thoughts. And putting it out there, that can be a really powerful form of communication. If we don't take the time to communicate and put into words what's going on for us, it tends to come out in ways that we don't have control over. So it'll come out in our demeanor, in our vibe. You're giving off that vibe of being very off, but the other person doesn't know what's going on for you. And so when you're feeling these emotions or this tension or stress, it's really important to be able to communicate that to your loved one, regardless of what type of relationship that might be. Of course, you want to be mindful in terms of what you're sharing with younger children and making sure that you're not leaning on them to become your emotional comfort. But you also want to be real, and you want to be able to showcase your inner world to that other person as well. Then there's also the commitment factor, right? There are many families that break up. There are many spouses and marital relationships that fall apart. There are many siblings who don't talk to each other. So that idea of commitment isn't just about those intimate romantic relationships. It's about, hey, we pulled through together. Like, this is a big disagreement in our family. We have differences, but we're going to stick together, and we're going to make sure that everybody feels that we're in this for the long haul. And the idea of commitment, I think, was well depicted when I heard somebody use the analogy of Alice in Wonderland, where she's following that rabbit down the hole. And you don't need to know the whole movie to understand this, but basically, you jump into this tunnel that takes you somewhere. And when you're jumping in, you are committing fully. Like, you're going to go down that tunnel. You're not sort of putting one foot in and then lowering yourself in and looking around while you're doing that. Because what that depicts is this idea that I'm not fully committed to going down this tunnel. I want to look around. I want to see what options I have. Is this a good idea? I'm constantly questioning. And so when we're talking about commitment, we're talking about, hey, I'm committed to this. I'm jumping in full throttle, and I'm choosing this. I'm not looking around for other options. I'm not looking around to compare. I'm in this. And so commitment is a big factor of how we build intimacy in our relationships. And then there's one more, which is forgiveness. Relationships are hard work, okay? They will challenge you. They will make you feel resistant. They will bring up a lot of emotions. In fact, I remember my brother telling me, he's like, hey, you get to a point in life where you think you're doing pretty good as a human being. You worked on a lot of things, and if you really want to know what your flaws are, get married. And he was joking around, but it was really interesting to me because I was like, yeah, you know what? Your spouse will challenge you when you're in an intimate relationship. You are going to be challenged, and you have to become the stone to each other's tool. You have to help each other be sharpened. And so there are going to be a lot of moments when you feel like you're up against each other. And so in these kind of relationships, and even in families, not just those intimate relationships, families, friendships, siblings, workplace relationships, there is a need for forgiveness. And my favorite quote about forgiveness is, to forgive is to set the prisoner free, only to realize the prisoner was yourself. I don't know who said that, but thank you to whoever said that. It wasn't me. It's not my content. But it really rings true to me that when you hold on to resentment or a grudge, you're not punishing the person that you're holding a grudge against. You are only building more tension and more stress for yourself. And forgiveness has been hard even in my own life, and to get to that point takes a lot of work. But when you forgive somebody and you're able to let go, there's lightness that enters your life. And one of the ways that I've found helpful to be able to forgive is to think about, how we as human beings, we turn out into who we are due to so many factors. There's biology, there's nature versus nurture arguments, there's these experiences that you have in life that shape who you are. There are people in your life that shape who you are. Then you've got your own internal world, your sensitivities, your personality that shapes who you are. And so one of the ways I've found helpful to think about forgiveness is becoming curious, right? Curiosity is a wonderful tool in life, especially when you're experiencing friction. Becoming curious about a certain person, how they got there, what led them to that place, or even their beliefs that you might really get angry about, becoming curious about them. Wow, they feel so passionately about that. I wonder what brought them to this point. And so curiosity has helped me to be able to let go of feeling strong aversions to people, and rather just becoming curious about how they got there and what led them to that point. So I want to talk also about the barriers to some of these relationships that we go through, because if you're aware of the barriers, then you can better plan for yourself in terms of how you can ensure that you're really working on these relationships that you care about in life. And so there's a few barriers to intimacy that I want to highlight. The first is fears. We have different fears in life that can hold us back from building the relationships we want. And many of these fears are very valid. I'm not questioning the validity of the fears. I'm just encouraging you to look at the impact of those fears. And so first, you want to become curious about yourself. Why do I have that fear? Why am I so afraid of opening up to a person, and digging that up for yourself? And then take them to court. Is this fear valid in this situation? Take that fear and, have it be questioned. Okay, where did it come from? What is the evidence for it? Does it apply to this situation? Have I had evidence to show me that I'm wrong? Like, this fear doesn't need to exist. And really sort of become curious about that for yourself. Because what fear's done is it kind of keeps you from sharing that inner world with somebody else that could help you build a better relationship. Then there's jealousy. And, jealousy feels like an old term, but it's very relevant for today because, we're constantly comparing our lives to other people's lives, especially when we have access to social media of thousands, millions of people who always sort of put out the best snippets of their life. And so jealousy can become pretty rampant and very easily take place in relationships if we're not careful about it. We can also get jealous about small things, opportunities that people in your life get that you don't get, or the fact that they may have a significant other and you don't, or in a friendship, that they got a certain job and you're both in the same field and you didn't. And so you want to be really mindful of that jealousy piece. Even it happens with children, right? Every child has a different set of parents. Can't remember who said that, again, not mine. But when you grow up as a kid, your experience of your parents are going to be very different of your siblings' experience of your parents. And so that can create opportunities where jealousy can be experienced. It doesn't mean that there's evidence for it to be true, but feelings are valid. Feelings are something that are experienced. And so when you know that there's jealousy taking place, you want to meet that head on and make sure that you can do everything to make sure that things are being communicated about and people's fears are being validated, and that you are making space to see that inner world of the other person. And then there's deception. That's the last barrier to intimacy. Did you see the lights turn off? It's because nobody's coming into this office. Hang on, I gotta stand up and like clap or something. Okay, I'm back. The lights are back. And talking about deception is really important too, because we think deception is about lies, but it's not just limited to lies. It's about withholding information from other people deliberately and intentionally, often not for the benefit of you all. And so, we're very clear with this with our children in terms of, when you don't give us the full information about something, you're technically not lying, because we talk about, don't lie. But you are withholding information, and that can be deceiving to people. And so it's really important to be mindful of any ways that deception might be seeping into your relationships, affairs, family secrets, spouse secrets, addictions. This destroys trust, and it can really affect your future relationships too, because that can lead you to shut down and have fears, which we know can impact a relationship. So that was a lot to take in. I hope this long form video is something that is valuable. I'll wrap up with a few quick notes, which is be yourself in your relationships as much as possible. The I and the we can coexist very naturally and very beautifully together. It's one of life's biggest challenges, but it's also really rewarding. I would encourage you to start small now. If anything that I said stuck with you, and you can create some healthy habits for yourself, whether it's friendships, whether it's intimate relationships, or whether it's things you can start doing in your family, make those changes now, because you can start building those habits, and one habit can build on top of another habit. Healthy closeness in your family, friends, workplace, dating, it really does set you up for those future relationships that you want to last forever. All the best, folks. I'll see you next time.